that inspire and inform our South Franklin Circle community and the community at large, and in person to the extent that space permits. I'm most fortunate to have a committee members who are critical to the smooth running of our dialogues. Committee members, will you please stand to be recognized? I had it on backwards. And hats off to one of our former retired committee members, Jenny Jones. The slide that you see explains her absence this evening. And just this morning, there was another special acknowledgement of Jenny's award in the Cleveland Magazine, and I quote, "Jenny Jones is an architectural photographer that capped a 5-decade career by donating 22,000 images and photo materials to the Michael Schwartz Library of Cleveland State University." I think we should applaud her, even though she's not here. If you've not been to the Chautauqua Room recently, you may see some things that don't look familiar to you. And that's because we're in a state of transition to a new system. And hopefully it will be done soon, and you'll be notified. So just keep watching the notices. The Dialogues Committee would like to express its gratitude to the unwavering support of Judson corporate people and also South Franklin Circle staff members. They're all especially important to the success of our dialogue series, and we really do appreciate it very much. But hold your applause until I've introduced all of them. Kendra Erdzik, President President and CEO of Judson Senior Living. Darlene Cash, South Franklin Circle Director of Community Life. Elizabeth Nitz, Judson Foundation Philanthropy Associate. Laura Mosley, Judson Foundation Director of Annual Giving and Donor Engagement. And Sean Heron, who's in the back room getting ready to stream this live. We truly are grateful for your support. Thank you. And our sincere gratitude to all South Franklin Circle residents who have sponsored this season series. These sponsorships underwrite honorariums and cover the cost of receptions. So now I'd like to very special thank you to this evening's sponsors. Bob Anschutz and Sue Hyam, George and Roma Aronoff. Roma couldn't join us this evening. And Rick and Patsy Lees. Patsy is here with us. Thank you so much. Now, following today's presentation, we will move to Q&A, and because we're live streaming it, please wait until I bring the mic to you, and then state your name. Try to remember to state your name for the benefit of those who aren't here, and then ask your question. And now it's a privilege to bring John O'Brien to the stand. John is Vice Chair of the Dialogue Committee, and he's going to introduce this evening's speaker.
Felton, you don't need to stand, do you? Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm pleased to introduce tonight's speaker, Felton Thomas Jr. I have alerted Stephanie Jansky, one of Felton's executive team members, that I've done my own little bit of research on him, because I know you've all studied the brochure for tonight's meeting, so there's no sense repeating all of that. And Felton, I hope you feel that if I get anything wrong, you can correct me. Felton Thomas Jr.'s great love of books and reading was kindled by his grandmother, who would read the Bible to him and his 6 siblings every evening. As a teenager, Felton found his local library offered him an endless selection of stimulating books and also provided him with a sanctuary from the streets of the inner city in Las Vegas. In fact, he hung out at the library so much that one day the librarian said to him, "If you're going to be here every day, you might as well work here." Wow, that was the start of Felton's 40-plus year library career when he was hired to work as a page, shelving books at the library at his neighborhood in Las Vegas. Flash forward from this modest start to the year 2009, when on his 43rd birthday, he was offered the job and selected to lead the Cleveland Public Library, one of the largest and most respected library systems in the country. And for those of you who are recovering accountants like myself, with total assets greater than $330 million and annual revenues greater than $85 million, a big deal. Felton's first day on his new job was Martin Luther King Day. And the temperature in Cleveland was a -12. A rough welcome for a young man from Las Vegas who had earned his master's degree in library science in Hawaii. But obviously, Felton was more than up to the challenge, and he embraced his new job and his new city with energy and passion, as you'll learn tonight. And the results have been extraordinary. 2 of the very special boards that Felton has chaired during his 16-plus years in Cleveland are the Cleveland Food Bank, next month's speaker, and the Cleveland School for the Arts. Felton's profound perspective on the Cleveland Food Bank was reinforced when he was quoted as saying, "You cannot feed a child's mind until you have fed that child's stomach." And the second board, Felton and his wife Linda have 2 beautiful daughters who are graduates of the Cleveland School for the Arts, where Felton is currently president of the board. Their daughters have their own successful dancing careers, one currently in Singapore and the other in New York City. It is indeed a pleasure to introduce Felton Thomas Jr.
When you have too many staff members willing to give up all your personal information, you get great introductions like that. Thank you, John. It was one of the best introductions I've ever had. I very much appreciate it. And I do want to thank so many folks for this opportunity to be here. Pauline, thank you for choosing me. You have so many great choices, and you chose a librarian. What does that say? So thank you for this opportunity. Kendra, always a pleasure to see you. John, thank you for the introduction. And all of you, thank you for having me here today. So I want to I also want to make sure I thank the sponsors. Please, I thank you for helping to support to make this project keep going, because it is a wonderful opportunity. And look at this crowd. Great to see the librarian on top of that. So let's make sure we get this here. Let me tell you my story, and John, you were really, really good. You had so much of it, right? There's a few things I'll talk to you about later. But I want to talk a little bit about my story because you need to understand who this person is that runs the Cleveland Public Library. Because for many years, I never thought I was going to be a librarian. And some days I wake up and I'm going, how did this happen? How did I become a librarian? But I started, as John said, going to the library when my friends started getting into trouble, right? At 12, me and my friends, and I was born and raised in Las Vegas, and we would go and play games and do things. And then I started noticing things like they were talking to people who they shouldn't be. And it was just at the time where gangs were really becoming prevalent in the west of the country. And I was like, I gotta get away from them. And it was the greatest decision that I ever made. One of my two best friends, one of them ended up being killed in a drive-by, and the other is in prison for life. So that was a very important decision that I made to start every day when we got off our bus and we would pass the library, I would check in and go into the library, right? And so as I walked in, as John said, after a few months, the librarian said, "You're here every day, you should work here." What she didn't know was that I was only 13. So for 3 months, I have the prevalence of being the only person, or the youngest person to ever work for the Las Vegas Clark County Library District, and they made sure to tell me, never tell anybody how old you are, right? So I then went on and I was working and continued to go to, finished high school, went to UNLV, got my degree in psychology, was on my way. I wanted to be a sports psychologist, and my director came to me and said, "Felton, all these folks love you. You're like their kid. Everybody wants you to be successful. We want you to become a librarian." And I was like, "I don't really want to be a librarian." And he was like, "All right, we will pay for you to go to library school, and you can go anywhere on this list." And at the bottom was the University of Hawaii. And I said, "Goodbye." All right? And it was the best decision I ever made. I ended up meeting my wife there, and I came back, and I ended up being the manager of the library I grew up in, right? And still not with my full head on about what libraries could do until one day I received a letter from a young man who was at school to be a teacher. And he said, "I want to be just like you. You don't know it, but I've been role modeling you and how I wanted my life. I'm away to be a teacher now. I'm going to come back to the neighborhood and give back just as you have given back." And then it was the light just kind of shined in me. It was that epiphany moment where I realized that I had a role to play in this country, and that role was making sure that libraries could change people's lives. And so I left Las Vegas with this concept that libraries had to move from being transactional to being transformational. And for some reason, Cleveland agreed with me. And they said, "All the neighborhood you're working there in, we have a whole bunch of them in Cleveland. We would like you to come to Cleveland and do this work here." And so my career here has been built off of how do we take what was the transactional role that libraries have historically had and move them to being more transformational and changes people's lives. Now, that's been a challenge, but coming to Cleveland Public Library made it more probably easier than any other library system, because along the way, Cleveland had always been open to change. And so that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. But first, and I apologize because I know you like the microphones and all of that, and you have the way you do things, because I was just going to say, I want to hear your library story. Whenever I go and speak, I ask people, tell me something in which the library has changed your life. And inevitably, I get someone who met their wife in the library. I get someone who had that epiphany moment and started a business in the library, and they're willing to share. Does anyone have a library? They can do that in Q&A. All right, very good. Pauline has set the moment down. So, but we will do that in Q&A. So think about it. If you have a library story, Hold on to that, because I'd love to hear it. It's always fascinating, and I take those, and we take those testimonials with us. So let's move forward, and let's talk about Cleveland Public Library. Mr. Andrew Carnegie. And so folks may know a lot about Andrew Carnegie, or may have heard about Andrew Carnegie, because Andrew Carnegie in the late 1800s through the 1900s basically built 3,000 libraries across the country, right? In those libraries, it was with the concept that we will build the building and your community has to pay for the staffing. We're going to find a way for you to create a community center for your community where information can be had, because Carnegie believed that libraries were the great equalizer, right? I just found out today, right? So after Carnegie died, they had the Carnegie Foundation, and the Carnegie Foundation had stopped doing anything for libraries, right? And I just found out today that the Carnegie Foundation are reaching out to all of the libraries, all the Carnegie libraries that are still available and open, and going to provide them with $10,000 for each library for the 250th anniversary of the country next year. So that's a great, at least one good piece of news coming to libraries. We haven't had a lot, but that's a really good thing happening. So here's how libraries started in Ohio. In Ohio in 1853, the state started funding schools. We are in Ohio, unlike any other state that I've seen, where the schools actually control many of the libraries. So we are a school library, right, where the school district basically serves as our boss. And in 200 libraries, there are 251 library systems. Ann Gillespie there put her hand over her face, she said. But no, there are 251 library systems in the country, in the state of Ohio. Of those 251 library systems, about 190 to 200 of them are school libraries, where the schools serve as our support for us as a library. We started in 1869. Cleveland started really kind of growing as a space, and we petitioned to have a library created underneath the schools. And so if you ever see any of our swag, you'll see Cleveland Public Library. We call ourselves the People's University, and we were established in 1869. We really started building we were initially downtown, and we created what we call the first to do open shelving. So if you remember, and many of you may see this in New York or whatever, where if you're looking for a book, you have to go to a reference librarian and give them what book you're looking for, and all the books are held behind the library. We were the first library to actually do open shelving, where we just put the books out for everyone, because our director at that point in time felt like we can trust our community. It's the community's library. They should have access to it. And that's why I love the Cleveland Public Library, because the Cleveland Public Library has always broken through, even as the third largest public research library in the country. We have never had the elitist moment of these items are not for the community. These items are for everyone. And then we started our first children's library, one of the first in the country to have a children's library, because at that point in time, kids were not expected to be able to have access to a library, but we wanted to make sure the kids have a space. And so I'll show you some pictures that kind of go along with this. This is what Superior Avenue looked in 1869 as we built one of our first libraries. This is some of our first libraries there in 1890. And this ended up being really the first library from 1869 to 1872, Northrop and Harrington's. It is, in essence, basically West 3rd Street downtown. So this is the person who basically created everything, Mr. William Howard Brett. He is the godfather of Cleveland libraries. If you go into the main library downtown, how many of you have been into the main library downtown? Excellent. That's exactly what I would say. For all those who didn't raise their hand, shame on you. All right? No. If you did raise your hand, please, if you would like to call me, I'll make sure you get a wonderful tour of the space. So William Howard Brett was a forward thinker on how he believed libraries should move forward, how they should provide services to folks. He created us in the light of the New York Public Library and the Boston Public Library. That's why we are the third largest public research library in the country. And with that, he basically followed through on a number of things. We also, even because of him, we are the Ohio Library for the Blind and Print Disabled. So if anyone has someone who has a disability in seeing, they are going to the Cleveland Public Library to get their materials in Braille or talking books that we provide now. All right, and he created the first children's library, and unfortunately, he did not get to see the main library created downtown. The main library was built in 1925. Coming from an architect in 1919 to walk back to the library, he was hit by a drunk driver in 1919 and killed, right? So he never got to see the library, the main library, be built, but much of the library downtown is dedicated to his memory. So here's the interior of the children's area in 1899. We have some unbelievable photos just of the city of Cleveland. So my staff were like, we got a whole bunch of photos for you. We have over 2 million photos of the city of Cleveland. So if there's ever anything you want a picture of in the city of Cleveland from any period, you can call us. This is the space in 1915. And there is our service to the blind that started in the early 1900s. And here's a letter from Andrew Carnegie to William Howard Brett in 1912. So if anything, William Howard Brett was persistent, because as he was seeking to build buildings as Cleveland was growing in the early 1900s, he just kept sending letters to Andrew Carnegie over and over and over again. And at first, Andrew Carnegie said, I am not building any buildings outside of Pittsburgh. And then eventually he just got worn down. He built 1 to 2. And then ultimately, by 1917, he had built 17 Carnegie libraries in the city of Cleveland. And his last letter, this is not the letter, but he had, in 1918, he sent a letter to William Howard Brett, and he said, I do not know how I have built more libraries in Cleveland than I have in Pittsburgh, but you will not get another library from me. But by then, it had all been done, so it was a wonderful thing that Carnegie was able to build so many. Of those 17 libraries, 6 of them are still in operation in the city of Cleveland. That's the group plan. I will move on from that. This was the architectural drawing of our main library, built by Walker and Weeks, one of the great architects of the time. And I love this picture. And if you can see it, this is the cornerstone laying for the main library. Over 100,000 people showed up to hear them talk about the building of the Cleveland Public Library. So it showed that this library, this city, was behind the concept of a library and what it meant to be. So our main building was built for $5 million. That would never happen today, but it's a wonderful building, and for all of you who have been down there, I think many of you have said you've been to a Cleveland Public Library and been to the downtown library. It is a jewel for the city. We just were named as one of the top 10, actually we were third, the third most beautiful library in the country by Four Doors. So as they send people to travel, we get lots of folks who are traveling that want to come and visit our library just to see the architecture in its own right. And this is some of the pictures of the main library. And in many ways, you'll see that much of the library still remains the same. We've done a great job of conserving and preserving the library. So, of course, libraries started to change, and in the 70s, technology became a part of it, and we had to decide whether we were going to be a part of that technology change or we were going to run away from it. And luckily, our directors at the time, William Howard Gaines, who is another person, or Ernest Gaines rather, who is another person who has a long history of being very much innovative in libraries, was a part of embracing the technology. Although it's very interesting to see when you see them at computers, they're never actually using it. They're always just like looking at it, right? Every picture you'll see of them, I have many pictures, and they're always staring at it. They're never using it. We'll go through this technological revolution here from 1975 to now, but we had to move. So I think many of you remember the little catalog cards or whatever that were used or whatever. At the time in 1975, we had 5 million of them, and we had to take all of them and put them into the computer, right? And it changed everything. No more, I started working back when we were stamping cards and putting them inside books and things of that nature. And then we had to transition for that, and that took a good amount of time, and it took basically to 1982. How many of you know what CleveNet is? All right, excellent. And if you don't know what CleveNet is, I certainly hope that you get a chance to use it. CleveNet is basically our consortium of libraries. So when you use a library in Cuyahoga, actually we go all the way from Sandusky, all the way to the border of Pennsylvania, and all the way down to Wayne County. If you're using one of the libraries anywhere in the Northeast Ohio, it's probably a library that's tied to CleveNet, which is basically tied to the Cleveland Public Library. So a lot of libraries recognized that we had over 11 million items, and they wanted to get access to that, and so we created the CleveNet system. So many of you use CleveNet and may not know that you're using Cleveland Public Library, but you are using the Cleveland Public Library anyway. And that started in 1982. And then in 2003, how many folks use Libby or Overdrive or something of that nature? We were the first to start with Overdrive, right? And we were the first to start with Overdrive because hopefully you all know that Overdrive started here in Cleveland, right? And they actually have their company is right now in Garfield Heights. So if you are looking for a great speaker to have, Steve Potash, who's the owner of that, he's a lively guy, a very lively guy. He would be a great speaker to have to talk about how he started this. And basically when he was thinking of this idea, he had this idea about, could we take books and make them into virtual part of it? Can we create audio books for people that they would be able to check out from a library? And so he came down to work with our staff, and he was able to do it. Now they are in 92,000 institutions across the country, right? It's a multi-billion-dollar company, and all started here out of the Cleveland Public Library. Again, staring at the computer. This, Mr. Gaines. And there's our CleveNet system and all our spaces and where we're at. And so we just put this up for Steve Potash, and this marker is going to be at our Cleveland Public Library talking about this combination of us working on ebooks with him. It's such a great partnership, and you will find that for those who use Libby, you may not know, but you have more access to more materials than anybody else in the country because of Libby being here, located here. They do a lot of work with us to make sure that they, even when they're experimenting with different materials and things of that nature, they start here in the Cleveland, Cuyahoga County area. There's me showing I can sit at a computer and look like I'm doing something even though I'm really not. And this is our Studio 525. So we've made a couple of transitions to what we do in libraries. And I was doing a presentation to the construction specialist industry recently. And why they asked me to speak to them, I could not tell you why. But they thought it interesting to get another perspective from libraries. And I talked to them about what we've been doing with maker spaces. And what we've been doing in our library is introducing maker spaces to our seniors and to our teens and driving those groups together, right? Because both groups have different forms of making that are important to them. So for our seniors, they want to learn more about how to make things using computers. And for our teens, they're very interested in making things that are what would be considered old school, crocheting, knitting, things of that nature. We were surprised when we got a donation of about 5 sewing machines, and the kids would not stop working with those sewing machines. They love the concept of creating something on their own. So we started matching our seniors and our teens in these maker spaces to do things, and it's been a really, really popular, important thing. So, and much of the things that are made out of that are then donated out to families who need the, you know, some of the crocheting, some of the socks and things of that nature, hats that they make and knitted for our community. This Studio 525 is a gaming center for our teens so that our teens have a space to come in after school to be able to do something. So a lot of times folks will ask, shouldn't you guys just be a warehouse for books? And I say continually, in essence, what we do is provide information for folks. The format doesn't matter, right? The format for how information was provided was always in print, but that format has changed over time, right? And Cleveland Public Library understood that early on when there was a problem between different ethnic groups in the city of Cleveland. What Cleveland Public Library would do would be bring those ethnic groups together and have them cook food for each other so that they can understand each other's culture. And so when you look back and you see that being done in the 30s, you recognize that it's not about format. It's always about trying to make sure people have the information they need to be successful, right? And so now the kids want to learn about technology and how to do gaming. And so that's something that we provide them for. And it's always very interesting because the teams are very loud. This is our Tech Central. It's one of our maker spaces that give folks the opportunity to do things. And again, us with our young people learning, and then with some of our seniors who learned as well. So the Cleveland Public Library, and let me double check, I want to make sure I'm on target. I think I'm good. It's changing, right? And libraries are changing. But libraries have to evolve. And the reason that libraries are very successful now is because we have evolved over time. I think folks are sometimes concerned when they go into libraries, and it's not a quiet place any longer, right? It is the community's living room. And in the community's living room, people can bring in food, people can have conversations, people can have dialogue that sometimes isn't, you know, built around agreement, but it can be civil. Libraries of today have to be something different. So when I got here and the librarians were telling me that they're bringing food every day for our kids because they were hungry, I said, we've got to figure this out. So we reached out to the food bank, and the food bank then worked with us to bring in meals for our kids after school. So every year we average about 200,000 meals that are provided for kids after school, right? Again, I had a lot of our librarians who said, especially one librarian who said, I didn't go to library school to be a lunch lady, right? However, 2 years later, when we were doing our strategic planning, we asked our staff, what was the most important thing that we did? And leading the pack was provide lunches for our kids after school, because they recognized how the change it was. Because once the kids were fed, they were a very different group, and they were very interested in learning without, and being willing to kind of be taken to that next level of education, right? So we tied that in, and then we provide tutoring from Cleveland State University and from community college for the kids right after school, right after they eat. So we have 10 million physical items, 4 million digital items. That number for digital items is, in essence, doubling almost every year. I should have probably added to this one of the most important new collections we got. In a few years back, we received a call from, basically John Carroll University. They were holding the newscast in Cleveland from 1950 to 1990 of all the stations, and they were going to throw them out, right? They were all on reels, and they were being held at John Carroll, and John Carroll just didn't have the space for them. And so we started getting calls, and John Carroll called us, and they're like, we can't hold on to this. It's 250,000 different films, right? And so we were like, we can't let this go, right? And so we now are starting the process, calling it the Northeast Ohio Broadcast Archives, of archiving all of those and digitizing all of those documents. Just think of all the things that happened from 1950 to 1990 in the city of Cleveland. Much of that went and was national type things. You know, President Kennedy was here, Martin Luther King came to Cleveland. There's so much rich information that is there. But again, it can't be just put forward in a archive. It has to be created in a way that people want to access. So when you talk about how AI gets used in libraries, you're going to see AI as a big part of this process as we move forward. That's the new libraries of today, right? We're different. We provide the same level of ways of providing information, but we do it in a very, very different way. So with that, I want to end with, I'll just tell you, we have the largest collection of chess in the world. Any of you folks who love chess, come down to the library. Large collections there. I want to end with this. The classroom was a jail of other people's interests. The library was open, unending, and free, right? I think I talked to so many people who tell me the story of how without the library, they don't know what they would have done. It's my story, right? Where would I have been if the library had not been there for me? And so many folks have that same story, that the library was that safe place for them to go. It was that place where they could know they could educate themselves or just be away from some dangerous aspects of their life, right? We are struggling from the standpoint of there's a group of folks who don't believe that libraries should do any of the things I just talked about, right? They believe that libraries should just go back to being warehouses for books and only the books that they agree with, right? So there are laws currently being, thought through and worked on that would significantly decide what books we can have and where they would be if we had them. And I just say that if I could ask anything of this group as I finish here, it is that you continue to think about how you can support libraries, right? Because we are a foundation of democracy, the ability for people to get truth. And there are folks who are working to stop that. And we have to make sure that truth is always available to all of us. So thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Thank you very much, Felton. I think we all learned a lot, at least I did. Can you hear me on this? Mike, good. We'll now go into Q&A, and remember, raise your hand. I'll bring the mic to you. State your name, and then ask your question.
Hi, I'm Jenny Wilhelm, and I want to know, what is the library doing to hopefully not get past the bill that's going through the Ohio now to get rid of the
The property tax?
the property tax?
Yeah,
Are they
it's,
fighting it, hopefully?
yes, right? I think where sometimes we, as libraries, get in a little bit of trouble is we wait to be reactive instead of being proactive. But we're having conversations with our metro parks, with our other local governments to talk about how can we stop this. Because if this train starts working and moving forward, there are a lot of folks who are very excited by the opportunity not to pay property taxes at all, right? And if that were to happen, that would be devastating to the library. It would be 56% of our budget is property tax, right? So everything at the library would pretty much have to go away. We would just become basically a guardian of the book, and that would be our only role as a library if that were to pass. So we're working on that. I think we could be more aggressive in this, and I think a lot of folks can be more aggressive in this, but we're having those conversations behind the scenes with lots of different people who understand if this would happen, it's going to change everything that the community provides for them, right? And many folks see that, but others don't.
Do you have a foundation?
We do. So the Clinton Public Library Foundation is in place, one, to help support us by fundraising. So I have left a little present for you out front and some little things that have the information about our foundation. If you feel like you want to help support it there also are advocacy rows. If you want to just let everybody know at the foundation that you're really willing to be an advocate for our libraries, we would love that. The one thing that the legislators understand is that the people of Ohio love their libraries, right? Every year, on average, 85% of the levies for libraries pass, right? The only time they have ever changed their mind was when libraries put out the call to call your legislators and tell them to stop. We actually broke all of their machinery, right? And they were like, we can't mess with libraries. That was 8 years ago, and since then, though, they have started to get back into the mode of, we're gonna mess with libraries. So we need your support in making sure that they understand that you want to have, we have the best libraries in the country. Of the top 6 libraries in the country, 4 of them are in Ohio, right? And we shouldn't, one of the governors said, what's wrong with being 8th? Why should we be 8th? Why shouldn't we have something we want to be first in? So.
And in particular, he knew where he was coming today. In addition to the brochures, there are little pill boxes.
I didn't want to be bad, but we had some left over, so I was like.
Thank you for being here. I'm Bill Conway. In our men's group, it seems to be a lot of discussion about AI.
Uh-huh.
And I wanted to know how's that impacting your programs at Cleveland Public Library?
So AI is a really difficult conversation for us in libraries. One side of that, and this is a side that many folks feel with just from the very beginning, is that a lot of folks are worried about, will this do away with my job, right? Will there not be a reference librarian because we will create a AI icon named Judy who answers all your questions just using ChatGPT or something of that nature, right? And then on the other side of that is the fact that there is a tremendous amount of distrust just by the general community about, about AI, because AI comes with biases. Whoever is creating AI puts in the biases that they have just individually. And therefore, you have to understand that for communities that are not built around that, what they are going to receive as an answer might not be true to their community. So you take that. Then you go and move to the other side of it is, while people are very, very distrustful of AI, communities are very curious about what AI might be able to do. So I believe for libraries, it provides us an avenue, as we have always done for new technology to come out. The libraries have been in the middle ground of finding ways to bridge that gap between our communities and the folks who are the haves, who know all of this or who have access to it, to make sure that everyone has access in a way that can be important for them. So that's what role we're trying to do nationally. I was just at a conference in Seattle having this conversation about it with a lot of angry librarians who were like, I don't know what we're going to do. And, and I was just like saying, we'll do what we always do. We will find a way to find a map for us in which we are able to then create a path for our communities and help them learn how AI can be of help to them in their lives.
If you are legally blind, who do you go to in the public library system for help in reading books?
Absolutely. If you have any legally blind or have any kind of disability with sight, you would be able to call us. We would put you into as one of our members for the Library for the Blind and Print Disabled, and we would send you out anything you would want, right? So the staff there is wonderful. We're award-winning staff. There's 50 of those across the country. We're always award-winning for the work we do. And basically, you get to know the librarians, and they get to know what you like, and then they will send you things in the mail.
Nancy King Smith, and I had the opportunity a couple of weeks ago to, for the first time, be in the new Martin Luther King Library.
Oh, great.
Was quite impressed, and I'd like to know more about what all, and have you share with us what all's there, because I know it's tied to housing, and also any other really unique Cleveland libraries that have some of those different
Interesting
aspects.
type things. So we have our main library. We have two main libraries. Our older library that was built in 1925. We have our newer library that was built in 1997. We have, or rebuilding every one of our branches, right? And so we're halfway through, and the Martin Luther King Library was one of the buildings we just opened in February of this year. And that one is interesting because it's our first library that is actually underneath apartments. And we had to make sure we had the conversations with folks that they would not be able to just come down to the library in their pajamas down the aisle, right? But I think they finally got that understanding. But it's really interesting having apartments, because in essence what we do is the library serves as a anchor for a community by having apartments come on top of this. This is something that you're starting to see across the country now. Is that in places, especially like in big cities like Chicago and New York and whatever, places where there's a crunch on space, the libraries already have a space, and they're saying, okay, you want to build apartments? We'll give you this land, now build on top of us and build us a library as the first floor, right? So this was our first dalliance into that, and we're building one more like that. We're building a building on the west side that is going to be a senior center above the library. So we're excited about what this is with the Sister Judith Karam is the name for that. Many of you may know Sister Judith. And so that is going to be our next, we're actually in building, and that'll be our next library that we open. So thank you for that question, Nancy.
Ann Gillespie. I
Oh,
know
Ann.
we know that the Cleveland Municipal Schools are struggling right now. How does that impact you?
Well, I think where this and while they are struggling mightily, and I think they would say it. I was just at the state of the schools, and they said just that they are having the challenge of the fact that they are receiving reduced funds from the state and federally, and they have. In 20 years ago, they had a enrollment of 80,000 kids, and now that enrollment is 35,000, right? So, and though when you have these schools and you have alumni, they don't want their schools to be torn down, but you have too many buildings, and you have to figure out how you're going to right-size the organization so you can do that and make sure that the kids have the best likelihood for education. For us, it is about taking on some of the out-of-school time that unfortunately isn't available for our young people after school. And it was one of the founders of the Cleveland School of the Arts, the Friends of the Cleveland School of the Arts, which now is Cleveland School of the Arts group, and it worked really well when the schools and the principal and everybody was aligned. And it's a struggle when it's not. So what we have been doing as the library is to make sure that the library is that space that every child can come into after school and receive what many times they would get from their schools, but they're not able to do it because they just don't have the funding. So it's a challenge to do all of that, but it's the right thing to do.
I'm kind of wondering, when you were just speaking about the children having access to the libraries, some of them live in neighborhoods that you described yourself being in when you were growing up, where there is some worry about safety. And I'm just wondering, are the libraries in the city accessible for children? Is it safe for them to go to them after school?
Absolutely. I mean, that's been our biggest push, is to make sure that we are safe zones for young people. And when you walk in, you'll see signs of a big yellow sign to say that we are a safe place, right? That we have worked on everything that is necessary for young people to realize that this is a safe place to go, right? Unfortunately, like any other place in the city, there are things that happen outside of the library that make its way into the library. And there have been, there's violence happening in the city, right? But for many of our parents who are working after school, they can't leave their kids in school anymore. So the library is the place that their kids go until they're ready to be picked up. That's why we want to make sure they have something to eat, that they have tutoring, that we're doing a lot of interesting program that they want to do. We talk to them all the time. We were at one of our libraries, and I was having a kind of a focus group with some of the kids. And I was like, what would you want us to do? And they were like, could you take the back of the library and make it into a big athletic field? I was like, that's not going to happen, right? We can figure something out where we're not, the sports is just a little bit to the level. We might be able to bring in ping pong tables, and we might be able to do some other stuff, but we're not coaching football in the back.
Do you reach out to other than the public schools?
Oh, yeah. So we have a lot of partnerships with our private schools and with our charter schools in the same way. And it is, it's a challenge, I think, and as Ann just said, that unfortunately many of our private and charter schools have the access to get to the library better than some of the public schools, because the public schools can't pay for the busing to get to the library. So we have to pay for the buses so that the kids can come downtown to use the library, whereas many of the private schools and other schools have the money to be able to do that.
What part of your budget supports that?
So we are very fortunate. We have been We have a founders fund, which is based off of an endowment that we've received over a period of time, and folks are able to donate and help put funds in to kind of replenish that over a period of time. And so we've been able to do our programming off of that over a period of time. But it's, staff comes to me, and we are just having a budget meeting yesterday where staff was like, we have all these things we need to do and all these things that we're doing. Because not only are we doing that, we're doing legal aid, society with folks that are coming in, right? We're doing things for newcomers who are coming in to make sure that they can get citizenship. We're doing a variety of other things that are important for the community. And at some point in time, with the cuts that we're going to see, we have to make decisions on we can't do that. And it's heartbreaking because many of them are so important.
I have time for another question.
Thank you. My name is Marilyn Hyde, and I had a long career as a middle school librarian.
Oh, good.
And kudos to you and the libraries and the librarians especially, because I think it's so important today in this age of social media to connect kids with books. I saw it over and over when you put the right book in the kid's hand. Sometimes they become a lifelong reader from one book that they read. So I think it's very important, and thank you for promoting it.
Thank you for saying that, because unfortunately, the one thing that folks don't know is in the transformation of schools, one of the things that has been decimated is school librarians in schools. Many of the schools no longer have librarians. Now in Cleveland, I believe it is, they will have one librarian for every 4 schools. And there, at least, they have someone. Other libraries, other folks don't have any librarians in their schools any longer. And it's so important that, as Marilyn said, that our young people, especially our young boys, struggle to read. And unless you have someone who can find that right book for them, you're never going to get them connected to reading until they find something that they really, really want to continue to read.
One last question.
I'm Mary O'Neill, and I just wondered if you do any help or work with the homeless population.
Yes, right? So the question was, do we do any work with the homeless population? So we have a lot of partnerships with the Lutheran metropolitan community that does a lot of work with our homeless folks around bringing programs to them into the community and doing work there, and then also having them do programs within the library. And we do a lot of technology programs for our folks who have issues with homelessness to make sure they're getting the skills they need to move on. So it has been, I think you go to some libraries across the country, and it's a challenge because basically the library has, to some degree, been taken over by the homeless community. But we've really worked to find a way of working with the community so everyone has an opportunity to use.
Felton, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. I think we all learned a lot, didn't we? And thank you so much.
Thank you.
So now we'll move to the community center and enjoy our reception. Thank you so much for coming.